Structural engineer is one, you can say he's like an orthopedic surgeon who designs the bone structure of your building.
फाउंडेशन इज अ वेरी क्रूशियल पार्ट ऑफ एनी हाउस। जब आप घर बनाते हो, आपका ड्रीम होम बनाते हो, तो उसका फाउंडेशन एकदम सॉलिड होना चाहिए।
आपणक स्वप्नर घर देखिबाकू ही सुंदर होइथिबा उचित नुहे, बरं तार फाउंडेशन माने मूलदुआ मजबूत हेबा भी बहुत जरूरी अटे। जे कौनसी निर्माणर सबुठारु गुरुत्वपूर्ण अंश हेउची फाउंडेशन। घरर मूलदुआ सहित कौनसी प्रकारर बुझामणा भविष्यतरे विराट समस्यार कारण होई पारे। मने करंतु जदि कौनसी घर दुर्बल मूलदुआ उपरे बना जाइछि तो सिए सुंदर तो होई पारे, किंतु ताकू मजबूत कुहा जाई पारिबो नाही। आजिर शोरे आमे निर्माणर एही सबुठारु गुरुत्वपूर्ण अंश फाउंडेशन विषय रे विस्तृत भाबरे आलोचना करिबा। ब्रीथ आमे आपणक पई नै कि आसीछु हमर विशेष पदक्षेप न्यूवोको प्रेजेंट्स घर बनाओ अपना अ न्यूज 18 इनिशिएटिव, जहा आपणक घरर मूलदुआ को मजबूत करिबारे सहाय्य करिवो। जेमिति भल संस्कार पई पिला दिने आमर बड़ माने देइथिबा शिक्षा एक गुरुत्वपूर्ण भूमिका ग्रहण करिथाए, सेही परि जे कौनसी घरर मूलदुआ एहार भविष्यत स्थिर करे एवं एठारे आमे एवं आमर रियल एस्टेट इंडस्ट्री रो जणाशुणा एक्सपर्ट्स माने आपणकर एही स्वप्नर घरर भविष्यत आहुरी भल करिबा पई सठिक मतामत देबे। घर हेउची एपरि एक संपत्ति जहा अनेक पीढ़ी धरी आपणଙ୍କୁ साहाय्य करिथाए। सेथिपाई घर को मजबूत बनई रखिबा सबुठारु गुरुत्वपूर्ण एहार मूलदुआ, जहार मूल उद्देश्य हेउची घर को स्थिरता प्रदान करिबा एवं जे कौनसी प्रकारर प्राकृतिक विपर्याय यथा झड़, तोफान, भूमिकंप इत्यादि रु रक्षा करिबा।
Foundation is a very important part of your entire structure, which eventually has been designed by structural consultant. And once the foundation is laid, then the level comes where the plinth comes. So basically, plinth is something which actually defines your construction area, the built-up area.
फाउंडेशन इज अ वेरी क्रूशियल पार्ट ऑफ एनी हाउस। जब आप घर बनाते हो, आपका ड्रीम होम बनाते हो, तो उसका फाउंडेशन एकदम सॉलिड होना चाहिए। फॉर दिस यू नीड टू नो आपके सॉइल स्टाटा क्या टाइप का है। सेफ बेरिंग कैपेसिटी ऑफ सॉइल ये जानना बहुत जरूरी रहता है, जिसका रिपोर्ट आपको टेस्टिंग लैब से मिलता है। जो सॉइल के ऊपर आप आपका घर बना रहे हो, वेदर इट इज हैविंग इनफ स्ट्रेंथ टू टेक द लोड ऑफ एंटायर योर हाउस। अगर सॉइल स्टाटा एकदम लूज हो तो टॉपल डाउन के चांसेस होते हैं। सो सेफ बेरिंग कैपेसिटी ऑफ द सॉइल बहुत जरूरी है जानना।
Structural engineer is one, you can say he's like an orthopedic surgeon who designs the bone structure of your building, which keeps the whole structure upright, which keeps it stable, and it ensures that it remains within serviceable limits. So the structural engineer is the person responsible for the stability of the structure. All the foundations are entirely depend upon the geology in that particular area. We have in India lots of places where it's totally marshy, or we have deserts where it's totally sandy. So generally, if I'm trying to build somewhere in a marshy area, then I'll require elephant's legs. But if I'm trying to build in a desert where it's all sand, then I would require camel's legs. So the area of our foundation and the type of foundation varies depending upon the geology and what strata is available on your site. Generally, the reaction that you get from the ground depends upon the soil that is there. A marshy area would not give you much reaction, but still that higher footprint would give you more area, which would give you more reaction, which will help in the structure standing uprightly. But the reverse way, when you put a heavier weight in sand, the sand would tend to shift out. So you'll not get that adequate reaction. So there you require a smaller area, which will give you that same reaction. So this concept of area and the size will help you in designing your foundation.
आपणकर स्वप्नर घर बनैबा समय रे आपणको अनेक प्रक्रिया अनुसार जीवाकू हेबो। आउ जेतेबेले कथा उठे फाउंडेशन अर्थात मूलदुआर, तो प्रथम पादरु शेष पर्यंत सतर्कता अवलंबन करिबा ही बुद्धिमानर कार्य हेबो।
any region, before you begin the work, it is very important to ensure the region-wise characteristics of that particular region. There are three important parameters when you're building your house. First is the seismic data in your region. Next is the wind, the loading that you need to consider due to wind. And third is the soil classification in your location.
Once the plinth is ready, an architect go and verifies the plinth checking. Plinth checking is basically a measurement of the entire construction area on the ground floor. So once we verify it, we approve it, then the contractor can take it forward for the further execution. Once the measurement of the plinth is confirmed, then contractor is good to go on the further levels. Plinth checking is something very important because that verifies the measurements on site.
ग्राउंड स्टोरीड या ग्राउंड प्लस 2 स्टोरीड तक का जो स्ट्रक्चर रहता है उसके लिए एक्सकैवेशन आपको 6 फीट तक करना जरूरी होता है, जिसके कारण आपके सारे जो फाउंडेशंस जो रहते हैं घर के वो ग्राउंड के नीचे कास्ट किए जाते हैं। यूजुअली 2 से 3 माले तक की बिल्डिंग के लिए आपको 6 से 8 फीट एक्सकैवेट करना पड़ता है।
घरर संरचनार एक नूतन घरर समस्त दिग उपरे बड़ प्रभाव पकाई थाए। अधिकांश लोक निज घरर संरचनात्मक स्ट्रक्चर किंबा ढांचा विषय रे अधिक चिंता करंती नाही एवं तापरे एही प्रक्रिया रे करा जाइथिबा छोटोरु छोट भूल आपणक समस्यार कारण बनी जाए।
Now your house, if you are intending to build a pakka house, could be built of 3 types. First is a RCC house. RCC is reinforced cement concrete. As the name suggests, there is reinforcement in it which is made out of steel. Now this particular type of a house will be very good in an earthquake scenario, in a scenario where there is tornadoes. So the government is also pushing the country to build such kind of houses. The other ways to do it is to build a steel structure. It's a little expensive, but however it can be built. The third way to do this is to build a load-bearing structure. So load-bearing structure is a structure that is traditionally built out of, say, bricks or stones, and then you reinforce that particular structure at the edges on top of your windows, which is called as lintel levels, with RCC members, so that again such a house is better in any kind of natural disaster scenarios.
आरसीसी होने के बाद आपको इंटरनल एंड एक्सटर्नल वॉल्स का ब्रिक वर्क करना पड़ता है और ब्रिक वर्क का क्यूरिंग पीरियड खत्म हो जाने के बाद ही आपको प्लास्टरिंग करना अलाउड है। क्यूरिंग मींस कोई भी जब अपना ड्रीम होम बनाता है, सीमेंट, स्टील और उसके साथ में वाटरिंग करना स्ट्रक्चर को सबसे बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट एक्टिविटी है, क्रूशियल एक्टिविटी है। जितना आप उसको अच्छी तरह से पानी मारोगे, जिसे हम क्यूरिंग बोलते हैं, उसका स्ट्रक्चर का स्ट्रेंथ इंक्रीज होता है। सो वाटरिंग इज वेरी इम्पॉर्टेंट एंड क्रूशियल एक्टिविटी इन एनी कंस्ट्रक्शन। और इसके लिए जैसे कॉलम्स रहते हैं तो वर्टिकल सरफेस रहता है, तो उसको गनी बैग्स बांध के उसके ऊपर पानी मारना, सो दैट इट विल बी प्रॉपरली क्यूर्ड फॉर अ लॉन्गर पीरियड ऑफ टाइम। स्लैब कास्ट होने के बाद हम उसे पॉन्डिंग करते हैं, जिसके ऊपर कम से कम 15 दिन के लिए पानी रखते हैं। देन ब्रिक वर्क होने के बाद कम से कम 3 से 4 दिन का क्यूरिंग पीरियड इज इसेंशियल और उसी के बाद ही प्लास्टरिंग चालू कर सकते हैं।
जेपरी प्रत्येक घर स्वतंत्र होइथाए, सेही भली प्रत्येक घरर मूलदुआ मध्य अलगा थाए। एही पार्थक्य आपणकर संरचना पई जहा आवश्यक अटे ता उपरे निर्भर करिथाए।
When it comes to forms of construction, you've got a lot of similarities in block work and brickwork, where the materials are the key difference. And then Maiwan construction is a type of construction called slip-from construction, which really helps in the construction of mass housing and buildings where you need to go really tall with a uniform size of your column. Let me use these building blocks to show you a little bit of the example. When you're building your house or your apartment or the internal walls of your apartment or the walls, you tend to use bricks which are sort of stacked up as modules, and you can vertically take them up to build the wall design of your project. These Walls can be loosely broken down into two categories. You've got load-bearing walls and non-load-bearing walls. Load-bearing walls are the walls which are taking the structural weight, which are taking the weight of your roof essentially, for your house. When it comes to an apartment building, the load-bearing wall is taking the weight of the upper level or the upper apartment as well, and the ceiling. As a designer, when you're choosing a style of construction, it really depends on the scale or the size of your project. If you're building a simple standalone bungalow, you don't need to explore My1 construction because brickwork and blockwork can very much sort of like suffice your requirements.
Assam, generally the geology is such that foundation strata is available. But because of the terrain, you will find that there are issues in the depth of the foundation that is available. For example, in one particular plot, it could happen that my first column gives a foundation over here, but the next column would find the strata is available here. The next column would be somewhere here. So you have to ensure that all these are cast and again interconnected with each other at those respective levels. So that will help in the stability of your structure. When you are thinking of Bengal and I want to dig, so we have to dig more because my strata is lower than expected, and I start digging there, then to retain those pits, what we call as stability of slopes, when I'm excavating something, we find that the adjacent soil also keeps falling. So the size of the pit keeps increasing. Again, Bengal is extremely waterlogged. You end up spending a lot of time and effort in dewatering your place. So it is not possible to dig or dig deep and do these foundations. So in this case, we would prefer going down maybe 10 meters, 12 meters, and we use a concept which we call as friction pile. So those piles will resist the loads depending upon the length and the diameter of those. So we can choose an adequate diameter and choose an adequate length and get the required strength for your foundation. In a place like Orissa, you will have to go in for a deep foundation. Though it is coastal, it is also mostly silty or sandy, and hard strata, as we call it, is not available at general near the ground levels or at decent intervals in the ground level. So you have to go deep there. You have to go in for what we call as deep foundations, which could be in the form of piles. Again, these piles are also very important because it helps you in completing your project faster. Because digging there is a big task and you end up spending a lot of money trying to dig, build there, and again push back all the soil.
आपणकर घरर भित्ति प्रस्तर स्थापन करिबा समय रे सबुठारु गुरुत्वपूर्ण विषय हेउची आपणकर सामग्री माने मटेरियल बाछिबा। भारतर प्रत्येक प्रांतरे अनेक प्रकारर बिल्डिंग मटेरियल र विकल्प उपलब्ध। सठिक स्थायी एवं भल क्वालिटीर मटेरियल चयन कले भविष्यतरे आपणकर निर्माण पई आसीबाकु थिबा असुविधाकु आपण एडाई पारिबे।
In terms of choice of materials, there are a lot of sustainable materials which can be used. These days, you have a lot of additives to concrete which tend to sort of reduce the amount of cement being mixed. You've got fly ash, you've got plastics being mixed, you've got biomixes being mixed with concrete to reduce the carcinogenic effect of concrete on soil. So sustainable materials are definitely sort of taking the forefront when choosing how to build your foundation. Obviously, brick and stone are the oldest materials that have been traditionally used. They can be used for smaller projects where concrete is not required as a foundation.
ए पर्यंत आमे आलोचना कले आपणकर स्वप्नर घरर मूल दुआर, एहार गठनमूलक ढांचा एवं सठिक निर्माण सामग्री बाछिबा विषय रे। ब्रेक परे जानिबा भारत देशर भिन्न भिन्न राज्य पई अलगा अलगा मूल दुआर आवश्यकता गुड़िक बाबदरे। आपणकर स्वप्नर घरर मूलदुआ विषय रे आपण बहुत किछि बुझी सारिछंती, किंतु वर्तमान भी भारत देशर किछि राज्यर मूलदुआर आवश्यकता अन्य राज्य ठारू अलगा अटे। ଘରର ମୂଳଦୁଆ ଏବଂ ଗଠନ ବିଷୟରେ ଗୋଟିଏ ଅଞ୍ଚଳର ଜଳବାୟୁ ଏବଂ ଏହାର ଭୌଗୋଳିକ ଅବସ୍ଥିତି ବହୁତ ପ୍ରଭାବ ପକାଇଥାଏ। ଯେପରିକି ଭୂମିକମ୍ପ ପ୍ରବଣ ଅଞ୍ଚଳରେ ମୂଳଦୁଆ ଏହାକୁ ଗଢ଼ିବାର ପ୍ରକ୍ରିୟା ଏବଂ ସାମଗ୍ରୀର ଚୟନ ବହୁତ ଅଲଗା ହୋଇଥାଏ ଏବଂ ଏହି ଜିନିଷଗୁଡ଼ିକୁ ଧ୍ୟାନରେ ରଖିବା ଗୁରୁତ୍ୱପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଅଟେ କାରଣ ଏହା ଜୀବନହାନି ସହ ସମ୍ବନ୍ଧିତ।
When it comes to earthquake sensitive zones, it's also very important to pay attention to the traditional architecture in that region. For example, say if you go to Nepal, you've got a certain traditional style of building which uses a lot of wood and a lot of stone for the traditional houses. Now, these are materials which tend to behave very well in earthquake prone areas if they are designed and used in the right manner.
If it is a hilly region like the northeast or the Uttarakhand, there is a possibility of landslides, mudslides. So the architecture has to be designed in a way where it sustains these kinds of natural disasters. So one of the important ways the government controls the market and the amount of real estate that is being built in a particular city is by coming out with these development control regulations. So the government will control the amount of FSI that can be used in a particular plot.
सिस्मिक जोन में जो फाउंडेशन करना पड़ता है दैट शुड बी अ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग फाउंडेशन एंड इट शुड बी क्रिस क्रॉस्ड विद द प्लिंथ बीम्स। इसके लिए मैं एक एग्जांपल लेता हूँ। अगर आप कहीं बेड पे खड़े हो और सडनली आपने किसी ने आके आपके नीचे की बेडशीट एकदम से मूव कर ली तो आप नीचे से हिलोगे, यू विल फेल डाउन। तो सेम थिंग हैपन्स इन सिस्मिक जोन। आई विल जस्ट एक्सप्लेन यू विद द डायग्राम कैसे उसको क्रिस क्रॉस बीम से कनेक्ट करते हैं। These are all columns. I am just drawing it. अभी ये प्लिंथ लेवल पे ये कॉलम्स आपके आ गए हैं। इसके बाद में जैसे कॉलम का कास्टिंग कंप्लीट हो जाता है आपको इसे प्लिंथ बीम से कनेक्ट करना होता है। So I am just drawing the plinth beams and all these structures are RCC structure. ये सारा सीमेंट एंड कंक्रीट में ही बनता है। अभी मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ, प्लिंथ लेवल पे ये सारे कॉलम को कनेक्ट कर रहा हूँ बाय वे ऑफ प्लिंथ बीम। और ये प्लिंथ बीम जो रहते हैं एंड ये जो कॉलम्स रहते हैं वो अगर अर्थक्वेक आता है तो वो केस में एक दूसरे को अच्छी तरह से पकड़ के रखते हैं एंड दे विल नॉट अलाउ द स्ट्रक्चर टू मूव। ये देखिए मैंने इसको सारे को क्रिस क्रॉस से कनेक्ट कर दिया है। अगर अर्थक्वेक आता है तो दीज स्ट्रक्चर ऐसे करने से दे विल नॉट अलाउ द स्ट्रक्चर टू मूव फ्रॉम इट्स पोजीशन। दिस इज अ सॉर्ट ऑफ अ क्रिस क्रॉस बीम्स एट प्लिंथ लेवल। सिस्मिक जोन में लाइटर वेट मटेरियल इज ऑल्सो एडवाइजेबल। आप इसका लाइटर वेट मटेरियल जैसे कि वुड है, गैल्वेनाइज आयरन शीटिंग है, इसका आप इस्तेमाल कर सकते हो बिकॉज इट कैन बी रीयूज्ड। वहाँ पे अगर अर्थक्वेक्स आने के बाद स्ट्रक्चर गिर जाता है तो वुड एंड जीआई शीट कैन अगेन बी इरेक्टेड। उसको खड़ा कर सकते हैं, प्रॉपरली वापस यूज कर सकते हैं।
निज स्वप्नर घरर मूलदुआ एवं संरचना निर्माण करिबा समयरे जणे साधारण व्यक्ति को केउ सबु कथार ध्यान रखिबा उचित से सबु भी आपण जानिबा आवश्यक अटे। जलवायु औ माटी हिसाब रे जिनिस बहुत बदली जाए।
When designing houses in earthquake prone areas, there are certain environmental requirements that you take care of. To give you an example, if you're designing your house in a very climatically wet area, you will react by using pitched roofs, sliding roofs, or angled roofs to sort of drain the water out. You'll also sort of start designing your house with a lot of rainwater harvesting elements to add a sustainable angle to it because you have an abundance of rainwater. So understanding your environment is very important when you're choosing the aesthetics.
For your 3 or 4 storage structure, you should keep in mind the following points. Some very important aspects in your foundation. First thing I would recommend is to check the type of soil. You should ensure that the soil has been tested by an expert. A regular calculation needs to be done regarding the bearing capacity, and you should also check the depth at which that bearing capacity is available. Generally, it is not enough to say the bearing capacity is so much, but it is very important to know at what depth the bearing capacity is available. Also, the next important point is the water table. is your area waterlogged or is this water table quite high, because that will differentiate the type of foundation you need to do on your site. The water table plays a very important role. You will find that this water table would fluctuate depending upon the seasons. In the rainy seasons, it would come up to the ground level. Others, it could go down, and that affects your soil surrounding. A saturated soil would behave differently than a dry soil. So the water table and the soil below are some very important parameters you need to consider when you're building your ground plus 2 or ground plus 3 house.
As a principal designer of your house, I will appoint the right structural designer who will design the skeleton of the entire building in such a way that it will withstand your earthquake-prone areas and everything.
When it comes to the foundation of a house, we are largely reliant on the structural engineer for the designing of the foundation. We have to submit the structural engineer's drawings to the government, and then you get an approval from the government.
ଏକ ଘରର ମୂଳଦୁଆକୁ ନିର୍ମାଣ କରିବାରେ ଖର୍ଚ୍ଚ ବେଶୀ ନ ହେଉ, କିନ୍ତୁ ସବୁଠାରୁ ଗୁରୁତ୍ୱପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ କଥା ହେଉଛି ବୁଝିବା ଯେ ଘରର ମୂଳଦୁଆ କେବଳ ଆପଣଙ୍କର ନୁହେଁ, ଏହା ଆହୁରି ଅନେକ ଲୋକଙ୍କ ଭବିଷ୍ୟତର ମୂଳଦୁଆ ହୋଇଯାଏ। ଘରର ମୂଳଦୁଆ ଏତେ ଗୁରୁତ୍ୱପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ, ଆଉ ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ସବୁଠୁ ଜରୁରୀ ହେଉଛି ଶସ୍ତା କ୍ୱାଲିଟିକୁ ଏଡ଼ାଇ ଏକ ମଜବୁତ ଫାଉଣ୍ଡେସନକୁ ନିର୍ମାଣ କରି ଘରର ମୂଳଦୁଆକୁ ସବୁବେଳେ ପାଇଁ ସୁଦୃଢ଼ କରି ବନେଇବା। ଏହି ପରାମର୍ଶ ସହିତ ଆମେ ଆଜି ଆପଣଙ୍କ ପାଖରୁ ବିଦାୟ ନେଉଛୁ। ଆଗାମୀ ଶୋରେ ଆଲୋଚନା କରିବା ଆପଣଙ୍କ ଘରର ଡିଜାଇନ୍ ଏବଂ ଲେଆଉଟ୍ ବିଷୟରେ। ଆପଣଙ୍କ ଘର ତିଆରି କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଆମର ଏହି ଖାସ୍ ସିରିଜ୍ ନ୍ୟୁଭୋକୋ ପ୍ରେଜେଣ୍ଟସ୍ ଘର ବନାଓ ଅପନା, ନ୍ୟୁଜ୍ 18 ଇନିସିଏଟିଭରେ ଆଜି କେବଳ ଏତିକି।